Hello, comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Taught Me Sunday Study featuring Chairman Omali Yeshitela. My name is Akilia Naif, the Director of Agitation and Propaganda for the African People's Socialist Party, as well as your MC for this morning. Make sure to hit that like button and share this video on the platform that you are viewing from. This week, Chairman Omali Yeshitela will be guiding us through a study on dialectical materialism, working through Maurice Cornforth's Materialism and the Dialectical Method, starting on page 5. The study materials have been linked in the Facebook and YouTube descriptions for your benefit. For the first hour, the chairman will review the study materials, and in the second hour, we'll open it up to you, our live viewers, to ask your questions. It's my honor now to introduce our leadership, the leader of the African nation and the worldwide African Revolution, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru, Comrade Director Akile, I want to thank you so much for introducing the discussion on today, introducing me, and welcome everybody to this important discussion on dialectical materialism. I want to make it clear that our objective here is not to transform everybody into some kind of scientist or philosopher. Our objective here is to contribute to the development of a revolutionary capacity that the African People's Socialist Party is engaged all the time in solving the problems of the revolution. And that has a lot to do with how we can win participation of masses of our people, and especially of the working class, into a revolutionary project under the leadership of the Advanced Detachment, which is the African Socialist Party, African People's Socialist Party, and sometimes characterized as the African Internationalists. When we look at African Socialist International, when we're looking at the party as it makes itself manifest throughout the world. We're going to be talking about using this work by Maurice Cornforth. It is characterized as materialism and the dialectical method. And Cornforth was a member. He was a member of the British Communist Party, a really important member, particularly in the 1950s. And he was responsible for the development of a lot of their theoretical work. And we want to use this Cornforth as our text just because it's a shortcoming of our own. That, we offer an element of self-criticism for, and we keep doing this because by now we should have done a piece on dialectical and historical materialism that speaks specifically from the voice of the African working class. Truth of the matter is, we have been doing that over a number of years. We just haven't written about dialectical and historical materialism as a text. Isolated the question separate from the different struggles that we're involved in. But if you go back and look at any of the political reports going back for 40 years or more, you will see, and the more we have this discussion now, understand that it is dialectical materialism or dialectical and or historical materialism, which is the historical materialism is the application of the method of investigation and analysis, the dialectical method and investigation of analysis and looking at society itself. So we've been doing that, but we haven't done this kind of work that Cornforth has done. And it hasn't been a matter of laziness. It truly has not. As I mentioned, if you go through all of our works, you will see that, and you will be able to understand, if you didn't already, how the dialectical and historical materialism has been utilized and taught, even if it hasn't been characterized as dialectical materialism in every instance through virtually everything that we have written and discussed in the past. So I like Cornforth's work, despite the fact that one would be hard-pressed to characterize the British Communist Party as revolutionary. But I like his work because he does delve into the question of philosophy as such. And I think that's important. The discussion of philosophy is something that does not anticipate participation by the unwashed masses, by the colonized working people, upon whose lives and resources the colonial capitalist system depends for its existence and sustenance. Generally speaking, philosophy is considered the purview of high-minded professors ensconced in musty classrooms and boring, reluctant students with irrelevant nonsense. It is not something that colonized, oppressed workers feel compelled to leave the real world to indulge in. It appears impractical. We are engaged in this discussion of philosophy for purely practical reasons, however. We want to be free, and we want to build a different kind of world that does not rely on exploitation. And we have concluded that we must have the capacity to define the world as it is, going beyond the purely subjective response it evokes, and to envision the world as we want it to be based on knowledge of the requirements for its construction. And we have recognized the shortcomings of the explanations we've been given for reality by virtually every institution that we encounter as colonized working people. So this is why we are here today as members of the African People's Socialist Party. We recognize ourselves as the advanced detachment of our nation and class, organized in our own selfish interests and as professional revolutionaries with the responsibility to lead the African working class in pursuit of self-liberation in the process of emancipating the entire African nation. It is not a boring pursuit. It is an example of the advanced detachment, bringing the masses of working people into knowledge of the laws of society and participation in shaping society to advance the interests of our nation, our class, and the exploited peoples and workers of the world. We're using as our text the work by Maurice Cornforth, who was a member of the Communist Party of England and provided it with considerable, that is to say, the Communist Party of England with considerable theoretical leadership. Cornforth was a self-declared Marxist, and he considered the discussions we are engaged in today around dialectical materialism as Marxism and or philosophy. We will see during the course of this discussion that we have various disagreements with Cornforth, but we do appreciate the work he has done in providing structure to this discussion and to the fact that while discussing dialectical materialism, he entered into the important discussion of philosophy that most discussions of this subject does not intentionally do. So do not intentionally do. So Cornforth is also useful because he speaks as a member of a political party and is obligated to discuss the relationship ideology, theory, and philosophy have to Revolutionary Party work, although anyone would be hard-pressed, as we said earlier, to define the British Communist Party as revolutionary. We are African internationalists. This is our philosophy. We have become African internationalists through utilizing the method of investigation and analysis known as dialectical materialism to reach the conclusions, providing us with a scientifically based philosophy that informs all our work and provides us with a to what end that all revolutionary parties must provide and project to live up to the name revolutionary. Although we use a method of investigating and investigation and analysis perfected by Marx, dialectical materialist investigation and analysis have brought us to different conclusions than Marx about the advent of capitalism in the world that contribute to the definition of Marxism and Marxism. As we go through this work, our reasons for the departures alluded to here should be clarified for participants. Ours is a discussion of African internationalism that utilizes the method of investigation and analysis characterized as dialectical materialism for our philosophical and theoretical conclusions as African internationalists. So we're going to start with part one, materialism, and I'm going to do a lot of reading, and hopefully that this reading will not bore you to death, and I will, from time to time, intervene in some of the readings to explore with greater depth some of the things being raised by Cornforth, and certainly in order to perhaps offer some clarification for why we think this is important. So part one of this book, and that we are looking at from Cornforth, that is to say, materialism and the dialectical method. Part one, materialism, and it begins with party philosophy, and that's really important. Every philosophy expresses a class outlook, but in contrast to the exploiting classes, which have always sought to uphold and justify their class position by various disguises and falsifications, the working class, from its very class position and aims, is concerned to know and understand things just as they are, without disguise or falsification. The party of the working class needs a philosophy which expresses a revolutionary class outlook. The alternative is to embrace ideas hostile to the working class and to socialism. This determines the materialist character of our philosophy. So this is really important, because Cornforth opens up, talking about philosophy and how it represents a class outlook, and how, as opposed to exploiting classes that which have had to uphold and justify their class position through using various kinds of disguises and falsification, that the working class, from its very position as the working class, is concerned to know and understand things just as they are, without disguise or falsification. And the party of the working class needs a philosophy which embraces a revolutionary class outlook. The alternative is to embrace ideas hostile to the working class and to socialism. And so I think that's really an important jump off. And it also helps us to perhaps understand some of the things that we've been saying as the African People's Socialist Party, helping us to define African internationalism for a long time. The fact is that what dialectics will teach us, and this discussion will teach us, is that when we are looking at this question of class and class struggle, and that it's not good enough to look at this issue, particularly specifically from a European viewpoint. This is not some race nationalism that I'm passing off now. About the white man this and the white man that. This is based on how the society is structured in the whole world. And this is what we're looking at. When we go to this discussion of dialectical historical materialism, we want to look at how our relationship to this world and our destiny in it. This is what we're looking for. And the world is structured a certain way. The economy of the world is structured in a certain way that predetermines various kinds of relationships that people are going to have. This is what is stuff that we have to be able to discern here. And this is part of what will distinguish us from people who characterize themselves as Marxists, or from the various worldviews that will come from colonizers, despite the question of whether or not they are militant and progressive, as is characterized, or left colonizers or rightist or fascist colonizers. The fact is, what we are doing here is saying that the profound, most critical contradiction that exists in the world, a problem in the world, the issue that where for us the dialectics, and we'll talk more about dialectics, become much more significant, is in recognizing the fact that the world, the whole world, is one that the world economy that embraces the planet Earth is one that is characterized primarily by a relationship between oppressed and oppressor nations. That this is what the world economy revolves around, and whatever issues and struggles that exist in the world relate to this primary contradiction in the world, the relationship between oppressed and oppressor nations. And so we say that, again, the party of the working class needs our own philosophy, which expresses a revolutionary class outlook. And the alternative is to embrace ideas hostile to the working class and to socialism. And this determines the materialist character of our philosophy. So if we ever do conclude, and we have to conclude through African internationalism, that the primary contradiction in the world is that which exists between oppressed and oppressor nations, then we also have to come to a conclusion, as we have come in the African People's Socialist Party, that the class question, as we will talk about during this process, is concentrated in the colonial question. When we talk about the relationship between oppressed and oppressed nations, we are talking about the relationship between the colonized, that is us, and that is the majority of the peoples in the world, and the colonizer, which can be defined essentially as white people, at least from its inception as a colonialism, as a social system that has given rise to the existing order that we are contending with, the existing dominant, central, if you will, world economy that we are contending with, within which the struggles of human beings are playing out today in terms of either trying to control the world or change our relationship to the world as it exists. So we look at party philosophy and class philosophy. Dialectical materialism has been defined as the world outlook of the Marxist Leninist party. This definition may appear a strange one, both to many politicians and many philosophers, but we will not begin to understand dialectical materialism unless we can grasp the thought which lies behind this definition. And so he's saying that here he starts off as saying that dialectical materialism has been defined as the world outlook of the Marxist Leninist party. And it is true that for a long period of time, when you talked about dialectical materialism and as it relates to a revolutionary party, that has been characterized as the Marxist Leninist party. And of course, if we look at the African People's Socialist Party, it is also true that the African People's Socialist Party has achieved much of its definition as a consequence of the work that was done by V.I. Lenin, who led the Russian Revolution that has been described as the first socialist revolution that's happened in the world, wherein the working class had its own advanced attachment in the form of the party that Lenin led, and they achieved, they won liberation. And to do this, Lenin went beyond where Marx had brought certain questions. Marx had talked of what has been characterized as Marxism. What Marx brought to this discussion of the world economy was an assumption that through this process that we are talking about dialectical materialism, and especially as it applied to looking at analyzing and investigating society itself. Marx had concluded that it was sort of a natural kind of consequence of development that would lead the society from capitalism to communism. That it was a natural phenomenon. He had developed certain stages, if you will. He had characterized certain stages of development that's been characterized as the Marxist theory of development that starts with communalism, a primitive communism, a primitive communalism, where there are no class contradictions and there is no exploitation of anybody. Women are not oppressed, etc. And then it is from within this process of primitive communism that we see rise slavery, not what has happened to African people. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about the slavery of going back 1,000 years or more than that, where Europe, where what is now Europe. I mean, when you look at people who are called Slavs and things like that, the word slavery takes its definition from that. So this is the time where Europeans were oppressing Europeans, where, well, that was even before the advent of Europe. There was no such thing as Europe, but different groups of people who lived in this specific territory that we now know as Europe were involved in enslaving people. So he says that from moving from this primitive communism, where there were no class contradictions, there emerges from this that he's characterizing as the development of human society. There emerges this slavery, where there now appears the primary contradictions between the slave master or the slave owners, people who actually own human beings, and those who labor for them, and where the relations of production, if you will, is that those who are enslaved produced and owned, they produce everything and own nothing, and those who are the owners of the slaves own everything. And then from this contradiction, from this society, another society emerges naturally from contradictions within this society, this mode of production, if you will. And the contradictions that emerge from within this mode of production, the slave mode of production, there emerges another mode of production that's characterized as feudalism. We're looking, although Marx has talked about this, and Marxists as talked about this as being the process of human development, we're really looking at Europe essentially. And so from this slavery, where the people who labor, work, don't own anything at all, but they're at most the ability to work, then you have the slave owners who own everything that's produced by those who do the work. That's what we characterize as relations of production. And then from here, the contradictions from within this kind of society lead to the emergence now of feudalism in Europe. And now the ones who do work, they own something. They get something, but not very much from what it is they produce. Because under feudalism, this ruling class, this ruling body that own the landlords, the ones who are the nobility, etc., they own the land, and they own much of what is produced by those who are producing workers, who work on that land and can only keep a pittance for themselves, while the vast majority go to the landlords, to the nobility, etc., who live quite well from them. And here's where the fundamental contradictions within feudalism exist. But then this feudalism, we are told, leads to the advent of capitalism. And then from capitalism, we are told we make the leap to communism. So this is how Marx, the Marxist theory for in terms of development of human society goes from a time in human society where, according to Marx, where people people are essentially free, where people share everything. There is no class contradiction. There are not classes that exploit and live at the expense of others. To this period of slavery that comes out of that grows out of that as a consequence of a natural kind of development. And through this slavery, from this process as a part of a natural development, there comes this thing that we know as feudalism, and from feudalism it would be capitalism. And then from capitalism it would be communism. So Marx saw this as a kind of natural process, even though he did believe in organizing the masses and particular workers to be able, and he believed in the idea of revolution, but Lenin believed in a more direct intervention by the working class under the leadership of this advanced detachment. And he is saying that we have to have this advanced detachment so that we don't see history as something that simply happens and thrust into existence this new kind of society we're looking for. And we say Lenin suggested and did not. This is our the way we've articulated this is that we had to become accomplices of history. just couldn't rely on history by itself to do this. And so we become accomplices to history. And that's why Lenin worked to create a certain kind of political organization through which the workers who Marx predicted should come to power to create the communist society that, as a consequence of the emergence of the communist society, I should say. That was the prediction of Marx. And Lenin came upon the concept of building a different kind of an organization with a different kind of intervention by the working class. And this is the Revolutionary Party. This is what has been characterized as the vanguard party. And this is what has been characterized as the Marxist-Leninist party. So this statement by Cornforth here that dialectical materialism has been defined as the world outlook of the Marxist-Leninist party is not absolutely erroneous, and if you take them within that context. So this definition may appear a strange one, both to many politicians and many philosophers, but we will not begin to understand dialectical materialism unless we can grasp the thought which lies behind this definition. Let us ask, first of all, what conception of philosophy lies behind the idea expressed in this definition of party, or since a party is always the political representative of a class philosophy. So let us ask, first of all, what conception of philosophy lies behind the idea expressed in this definition of party, or since a party is always the political representative of a class philosophy. By philosophy is usually meant our most general account of the nature of the world and of mankind's place and destiny in it, our world outlook. That being understood, it is evident that everybody has some kind of philosophy, even though he has never learned to discuss it. Everybody is influenced by philosophical views, even though he has not thought them out for himself and cannot formulate them. Some people, for example, think that this world is nothing but a veil of tears, and that our life in it is the preparation for a better life in another and better world. They accordingly believe that we should suffer whatever befalls us with fortitude, not struggling against it, but trying to do whatever we can to our fellow creatures. This is one kind of philosophy, one kind of world outlook. Other people think that the world is a place to grow rich in and that each should look out for himself. This is another kind of philosophy. But granted that our philosophy is our world outlook, the task arises of working out this world outlook systematically and in detail, turning it into well-formulated and coherent theory, turning vaguely held popular beliefs and attitudes into more or less systematic doctrines. This is what philosophers do. By the time philosophers have worked out their theories, they have often produced something very complicated, very abstract, and very hard to understand. But even though only comparatively few people may have read and digest the actual productions of philosophers, these productions may and do have a very wide influence. For the fact that philosophers have systematized certain beliefs reinforces those beliefs and helps to impose them upon wide masses of ordinary people. Hence, everyone is influenced in one way or another by philosophers, even though they have never read the works of those philosophers. And if this is the case, then we cannot regard the systems of the philosophers as being wholly original, as being wholly the products of the brain work of the individual philosophers. Of course, the formulation of views, the peculiar ways in which they are worked out and written down is the work of the particular philosopher. But the views themselves, in the most general aspect, have a social basis in ideas which reflect the social activities and social relations of the time, and which therefore do not spring ready-made out of the heads of philosophers. From this, we may proceed a step further. And when society is divided into classes, and society always has been divided into classes ever since the dissolution of the primitive communes, that is to say, throughout the entire historical period to which the history of philosophy belongs, then the various views which are, and let me just say that, there are all kinds of prejudices which are involved here. And I think Cornforth does generally good work, but there are prejudices, all kinds of prejudices here. Well, even this whole concept of the entire historical period to which the history of philosophy belongs. And, he's talking about philosophy, European philosophy, because this work does not consider the history, the historical period to which the history of philosophy belongs. It doesn't deal with Egypt and various other expressions, philosophical expressions that preceded the advent of Europe and Europeans or white people as such. So I had to just say that because we don't want to, even in having this discussion and using this text, Cornforth, we don't want to throw the prejudices that come from the colonizers into here in a way that distorts our ability to utilize the method of investigation and analysis that dialectical materialism provides for us. It should lead us toward the light and not toward darkness, which is what most of the colonizer, so-called revolutionaries and what have you, theoreticians take us into, despite the fact that they may do an extraordinary good job in providing putting forth their worldview with, again, high sounding, words and phrases and things like that. But all ideas have a basis in class. And what we have come to understand when we look at the question that the primary contradiction in the world as African internationalists is the contradiction between oppressed and oppressor nations. And we also recognize that the class question is concentrated in the colonial question colonies. Colonialism is where the class question is centered. And so if you're not looking effectively at the colonized or toiling masses or working class, for lack of a better term, then you're not getting to the essential leadership of the class question. If your location as a part of the colonizer blocks your view, blocks your vision of oppressed colonized people, if your whole society, your existence rests upon a pedestal of those who are colonized, then your worldview is severely affected by that. But we as colonized people have attained our own voice, our own brains and whatever. That's what African internationalism does. It provides us with access to our own brains, to our own voice, our own vision and what have you. So when we say that, I just had to intervene when we hear this characterization. First of all, it is true that society is divided into classes, and it has been divided into classes for a long period of time. And it was divided into classes in Europe, where you had the peasants and those who serfs, and then you had the nobility, etc. That was class. That was class there in Europe at that particular time. So there was class since the advent of slavery. In Europe, there's been class contradictions and what have you. So class outlook obviously has always been real, and it's real today. And just the different configuration of what classes look like is something that has interfered with how Europe and Europeans can see the world, because classes look different than they did as something that existed in Europe during feudalism. And the advent and what Europeans have missed, and this includes Marx and some others, is that the world changed with the advent of colonialism as a world system. And colonialism became a world system that Marx referred to as the primitive accumulation of capital that was a precondition for the rise of the capitalist system itself, a primitive accumulation of capital. And Marx defined this primitive accumulation of capital as turning Africa into a warring for the commercial hunting of black skins. And there were other things that he talked about in terms of the primitive accumulation, but most of them revolved around European empire or imperialists going into other places in the world, turning, war against China, getting all kinds of resources through the Opium War that they made against China to force China to become a nation of junkies for the purpose of providing, engaging in what they call trade, giving tea to England. You have these tea-sipping Brits now who became tea-sipping Brits through the process of forcing China to deal with opium and becoming a nation of junkies. So you got a nation of tea sippers on the one hand and junkies on the other hand. And here you have a certain kind of dialectical relationship that emerges here. So, so we're looking at class outlook and the critical factor here. That the colonized people, those of us who represented what Marx called primitive accumulation of capital, those who he defined as having the same significance or a significance in political economy that is the equivalent of original sin in theology. So this is the starting point of it all. And this is something that's really important for us to understand, and that a point that we try to make throughout this process, and hopefully that we we can do this without confusing and undermining the discussion that we're having on dialectical materialism, because this should help us to understand better dialectical materialism. So when we talk about the systematic working out of, we say that the various systems of the philosophers always express a class outlook. And they are, in fact, nothing but the systematic working out and theoretical formulation of a class outlook, or if you prefer, of the ideology of different classes. And I think that is true. But the thing is that when we look at class and class struggle, and we have to recognize that the class question is concentrated in colonialism. And that what this has done is that you have a whole groups of people, and coming into existence, a new process, the so-called nation building process of the 19th century owes its existence to colonialism, slavery, the process that consolidated this what was before now, this competing forces in this landmass that we now know as Europe, who define themselves primarily in relationship to each other. You know, the Normans and the versus the different other kinds of ethnic groups that occupied the Celts, that particular space, in contention with each other. Now, through Europe going out, what would become Europe going out, the feudalists going out and attacking Africa in particular, but also other places in the world, then there is a redefinition, reorganization of the economy. What was before then, or if you will, the destruction of one economy for the emergence of another, like the feudal economy suffered a major defeat, destruction. It was destroyed through the advent of colonialism and bringing all these resources that Karl Marx referred to as the primitive accumulation of capital into play, and the emergence of a whole new world economy. So now you don't have the situation of Celts and Normans and all of these other people identifying themselves in contention, primary contention with themselves. Even though there is contention, now they identify themselves primarily in relationship, not to themselves, but to the African who has been enslaved, to the people in what we now know as the Americas, to much of Asia where war has been made. All of this is the basis for the development and the concentration of all these resources that existed among different groups of people going out there, more or less, carrying out their own struggles for creation of life and et cetera. Now it's now part of a single world economy. This is a new world economy. And what has happened is that the Marxists and most of the European great thinkers and what have you continue to treat England or to treat what they now, the emergent, what they call America or United States and France, et cetera, as these separate entities where you have one world economy in fact. You have one world economy in fact. And this is the dominant reality that the Marxists have missed and most of the others have missed, but it's become absolutely necessary for us to understand. So we say that philosophy is and always has been class philosophy. Philosophers may pretend it is not, but that does not alter the fact. And so we talk here about class philosophy and how the working and oppressed people have to revolutionaries, how our community, our people have to have our own philosophy that explains the world, recognizing that we cannot rely on the philosophy of the ruling class. Then we are talking about a philosophy that goes beyond and distinguishes this emergent entity in Europe that came at the expense of the rest of us and create a whole new world economy. And so the African people have to have its own worldview. But going beyond that, the African people in possession and developing our own worldview have to do this as a distinct self-interested group. And this is not something that can happen easily. And certainly there are sectors of the African population, like the Mexican population and like populations throughout the rest of the world that's connected now to the new social system, the new world economy that has come into existence, the relationship oppressor nation, the colonizer and the colonized. This new world economy has emerged. And there are sectors of our population that owe their existence to this relationship, to this new world economy, this colonial economy. This is what we are talking about, a colonial economy that came into existence as a world economy. And so then the leadership, when we look at the class question, the leadership of the class, the struggle against the bourgeoisie, against the ruling class, is concentrated in the working people who do all the production. And therefore, in order to make this revolution, the people have to have our own philosophy. And that philosophy has to be concentrated among the advanced attachment, which is the working class, that does not have the same connection to the colonizer as does the petty bourgeoisie that has been created in the image of the colonizer and connected to the colonizer economically and otherwise. So we say that, going back to Cornforth here, says that philosophy is and always has been class philosophy. It is and always has been class philosophy. And we remember that when we look at the European nation as such, it was born as a bourgeois nation. It comes into existence as a consequence of a certain sector in Europe coming to power as this capitalist class, overthrowing the feudalist lords and et cetera. So new class comes into play. This is the capitalist class, and the worldview of the population is the worldview of what? Of the class that dominates now. That is the capitalist class. Before this, when you looked at Europe, the worldview was that of the feudalists, and throughout what we now call Europe, the how is it called, the divine right of kings and et cetera. But now there's a whole new class that has emerged and has pushed the feudalist lords and nobility into a state of irrelevance, so to speak, in terms of some of the social forces. I mean, you still see some evidence of lingering evidence of some of the class characterizations, like the Lord so-and-so and Lady so-and-so and Prince, et cetera. You have these anomalies that that Europe and white people and some besotted Africans and other colonizers have to this period of nobility, But so the point is, we say that philosophy is and always has been class philosophy. Philosophers may pretend it is not, but that does not alter the fact. For people do not and cannot think in isolation from society, and therefore from the class interests and class struggles which pervade society any more than they can live and act in such isolation. A philosophy is a world outlook, an attempt to understand the world, mankind, and man's place in the world. Such an outlook cannot be anything but the outlook of a class, and the philosopher functions as the thinking representative of a class. How can it be otherwise? Philosophies are not imported from some other planet, but are produced here on Earth by people involved, whether they like it or not, in existing class relations and class struggles. Therefore, whatever philosophers say about themselves, there is no philosophy which does not embody a class outlook or which is impartial, as opposed to partisan in relation to class struggles. Search as we may, we shall not find any impartial, non-partisan non-class philosophy. And I think that's really important for us to understand, and then also helps us to understand the role of the party. And we talk about partisan politics, the class-based philosophy, the role of the party, the African People's Socialist Party as the advanced attachment of the international African working class that has come into existence as a consequence through this relationship that we have with the process that gave rise to capitalism, gave rise to the capitalist system, if you will, the colonial capitalist system as we characterize it. So bearing this, which means then that the African working class, we have to have our own philosophy, and this philosophy that we have, just as the class philosophy that exists among the colonizer is in fact the worldview of the colonizer, then the class philosophy of the African working class has to be the worldview of the colonized, which in this instance is expressed by its advanced attachment, and that is the African working class. And that is the party of the African working class, which bears on its shoulder the responsibility for the liberation of the entire African nation. Back to Cornforth. Bearing this in mind, then, we shall find that the philosophies of the past have all, in one way or another, expressed the outlook of the so-called educated classes, that is to say, of the exploiting classes. In general, it is the leaders of society who express and propagate their ideas in the form of systematic philosophies. And up to the appearance of the modern working class, which is the peculiar product of capitalism, these leaders have always been the exploiting classes. It is their outlook which has dominated philosophy, just as they have dominated society. We can only conclude from this that the working class, if today it intends to take over leadership of society, needs to express its own class outlook in philosophical form, and to oppose this philosophy to the philosophies which express the outlook and defend the interests of the exploiters. The services rendered by Marx and Engels to the working class may be expressed in a few words. Thus, they taught the working class to know itself and to be conscious of itself, and they substituted science for dreams. This is what Lenin said. It is the great and historic merit of Marx and Engels that they provided about scientific analysis, the inevitability of the collapse of capitalism and its transition to communism, under which there will be no more exploitation of man by man, that they indicated to the proletarian of all countries their role, their task, their mission, namely to be the first to rally around themselves in this struggle all the toilers of the exploited. That's the role of the working class. But the critical issue is, what working class are we talking about? And we are talking about the colonized. And the only since Garvey, or more than 100 years ago, the African People's Socialist Party represent the only instance where the working class, the African working class, dispersed all around the world as a part of the process of giving rise to the advent of capitalism itself, the primitive accumulation, if you will, that into the construction of capitalism as a world economy. The fact is that this world, this colonial economy is something that made the transition brought feudal Europe, changed feudal Europe into this entity that was transformed into a capitalist Europe that dominated the world. But when you talk about a world economy, when you're talking about all of the people connected to that economy, both the exploited and the exploiters being a part of a single project. And the problem is that the Europeans, because they have rested on this foundation of our enslavement and the enslavement of the colonized of the world, have only been able to see themselves. And so when they talk about making this revolutionary movement, they have generally been speaking within the context of the existing borders, and how the social system articulated itself just for themselves as people who might characterize themselves as French or as Germans, and sometimes as Americans, and then often as Europeans, because the world has known them as Europeans as well. And so this is how this so-called working class has come to be conscious of itself and to rally around itself, all the toilers and exploited. But the fact is that as African internationalists, we recognize that central to the emergence of what has come to be known as capitalism, which was the primitive accumulation that we call colonialism. We now talk about colonial capitalism, capitalism that came into existence through the oppression, exploitation of Africa, African people, and those people who have been colonized in the process of this to create this single world economy. You don't just have these different countries and economies just having some casual relationship to each other. You got one economy, more or less. That is being stressed severely at this time that we have in this discussion right now, crisis-ridden. And only we, as the colonized, only we as African internationalists understand what the hell is going on when we see this crisis and recognize, for example, the significance of an Afghanistan victory in Afghanistan, or the Taliban victory in Afghanistan, despite the fact that there are people who locked into the question of whether they are Muslims and religious and based on philosophical idealism versus materialism, et cetera, as materialists and as dialecticians. What we understand is the whole construction of the existing world economy is based on colonialism. And that Afghanistan was a part of that colonial entity, is a part of it, like most of the whole world, and that the victory of the people in Afghanistan, whether they're characterized as Taliban or what have you, takes us down the road toward the destruction of colonialism, which is the world economy that followed feudalism in Europe, and that is the bridge between the victory of the working peoples of the world and the existing social order. This is the uneasy equilibrium that we're looking at. So teaching the working people to know itself, to be conscious of itself, I'm quoting again, and to rally around itself, all the toilers and exploited. Marx and Engels founded and established the revolutionary theory of working class struggle, which illumines the road by which the working class can throw off capitalist exploitation, can take the leadership of all the masses of the people, and so free the whole of society once and for all of all oppression and exploitation of man by man. Marx and still with Cornforth, Marx and Engels wrote in the period when capitalism was still in the ascendant, and when the forces of the working class were first being rallied and organized. And we are writing in the period where capitalism is in the descendant, and the crisis is obvious to everybody around the world. And their theory, back to Cornforth, was further confirmed by Lenin in the period when capitalism had reached its final stage of monopoly capitalism or imperialism, and when the proletarian socialist revolution had begun. It was further continued by Stalin. This is Cornforth again. And Marx and Engels taught that without its own party, the working class certainly could not win victory over capitalism, could not lead the whole of society forward to the abolition of capitalism and the establishment of socialism. The working class must have its own party, independent of all bourgeois parties. Further developing the Marxist teachings about the party, Lenin showed that the party must act as the vanguard of its class, the most conscious section of its class, and that it is the instrument for winning and wielding political power. To fulfill such a role, the party must evidently have knowledge, understanding, and vision. In other words, it must be equipped with revolutionary theory on which its policies are based and by which its activities are guided. This theory is the theory of Marxism Leninism. This is Cornforth, and it is not just an economic theory, nor yet exclusively a political theory, but a world outlook, a philosophy. Economic and political views are not and never can be independent of a general world outlook. Specific economic and political views express the world outlook of those who hold such views. And conversely, philosophical views find expression in views on economics and politics. And this is the significance we're talking about of African internationalism. This guy's talking about theory of Marxism Leninism. What we really appreciate from Marx and from Lenin, we've said something about that. Marx did a great work along with Engels in terms of promoting and developing the whole process of investigating and analyzing society that we are talking about today when we talk about dialectical materialism. And Lenin did a lot in terms of giving the workers the instrument through which it can intervene in society, and it can engage in taking the power and exercising the power necessary for the construction of communism, the power that would result in the working class becoming the new ruling class and who own and control the means of production, which is how we define socialism, which is that bridge between capitalism and communism, where the working class, through its own leading party, is able to capture power, become the new ruling class, and can restructure society in a fashion so that you don't have a handful of exploiters being able to live at the expense of everybody else, and the working class, those who produce all the value, now own collectively the process of production of value, and the leadership become the leadership, monopolize the leadership in the society under construction on the way to a classless society that people refer to as communism. So we say, recognizing all of this, the Revolutionary Party of the working class cannot but formulate, and having formulated, hold fast to, develop and treasure its party philosophy. In this philosophy, dialectical materialism, are embodied the general ideas by means of which the party understands the world which it is seeking to change, and in terms of which it defines its aims and works out how to fight for them. In this philosophy are embodied the general ideas by means of which the party seeks to enlighten and organize the whole class, and to influence, guide, and win over all the masses of working people, showing the conclusions which must be drawn from each stage of the struggle, helping people to learn from their own experience how to go forward towards socialism. And this is simply a statement, a paragraph that really defines the significance of the political reports that we've been studying over a period of time to our Congress. And it says something about the responsibility of every member of the party to provide leadership in the communities that we live in. We have our newspaper, we go out into our communities, we engage in struggles that the people are involved in, because we have African internationalism, and we utilize the methods of investigation and analysis that's known as dialectical materialism. Then we bring the people closer to what is objective truth, and we show the way forward. We know ourselves as members of the party. We can understand the path of our struggles. So what we're talking about here, what he's characterized as the world outlook of Marxist Leninist party, we're saying of the African Internationalist Party, African Internationalism that exists throughout the world. Experience has taught the party the need for philosophy. And that is true. I mean, even though Cornforth is talking here about the Communist Party of England or whatever the hell he's talking about, one thing is true, that we have learned the need for philosophy. For experience shows that if we do not have our own revolutionary socialist philosophy, then inevitably we borrow our ideas from hostile anti-socialist sources. If we do not adopt today the outlook of the working class and the struggle for socialism, then we adopt or slip into, without meaning to do so, that of the capitalists and of the struggle against socialism. This is why the working class party, if it is to be the genuine revolutionary leadership of its class, and not to mislead its class by the importation of hostile capitalist ideas, colonialist ideas, and of policies corresponding to such ideas, must be concerned to formally defend and propagate its own revolutionary philosophy. So I know we're on page 9, and Comrade Director, where are we? How do we move? Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, I think that this may be a good place to stop because it looks like a break in the section or the start of another section. So I think it would be good to stop here.
Uhuru.
Uhuru. So I just really want to appreciate this study, and I wish we didn't have to stop, but I think that it's really significant. And, you know, I know that we've gone over this piece in particular before, but I just really appreciate you going over it in this period. And just this whole thing about, you know, everybody has a worldview, an outlook, and that the significance of African internationalism into the world, providing the African working class with our own revolutionary socialist theory. So just really want to appreciate this study, Chairman. And yeah, so we're going to go ahead and get into our, well, we have our announcements, but we do have our Q&A section coming up. So if you do have a question, please type that into the Facebook and YouTube chat right now. And like I said, we're going to go ahead and get into our announcements. So if we could pull those up. All right. So this study is being brought to you by the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, where we're winning the war of ideas. For your worldwide revolutionary news and analysis, you can visit theburningspear.com, order and distribute the Burning Spear newspaper, and become a subscriber today. Get a 1-year subscription, 12 issues delivered straight to your door for $25, or the new digital subscription. Get a combo of both for 20% off, and you can gift a subscription to comrades and family members. You can do all of this at theburningspear.com/subscribe. The October issue of the Burning Spear is here. Oh, sorry. Yep. Okay. The October issue of the Burning Spear is here. Order a bundle of spears to sell in your community. Go to burningspearmarketplace.com. Omali Taught Me airs on Black Power 96 FM radio, a project of the African People's Education and Defense Fund with the slogan, not just explaining the world, but changing it. Listen on 96.3 FM in St. Petersburg, Florida, or streaming online at blackpower96.org on the free Black Power 96 mobile app. The theory of African internationalism is a theory of practice. All of the energy of the African People's Socialist Party is focused on the destruction of colonial capitalism. Africans of the world, go to our website, apspuhuru.org, and fill out our contact form. If you are in the Oakland, California area today, don't miss the last day of Uhuru Furniture's off-site warehouse sale today from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the beautiful Aquaba Hall at 7911 MacArthur Boulevard in Oakland. High quality furniture, priced to move, plus a buy one, get one free on all art. Buy Black Power products will be on site, including the Burning Spear newspaper and Burning Spear Publications books, Decolonades all natural hair and skincare products, Uhuru Planet Revolutionary apparel, t-shirts, and tote bags, plus Uhuru pies will be on site with delicious, all-natural, handcrafted sweet and savory pies and cookies. And all purchases above $50 gets a free Uhuru cookie, and all purchases over $100 gets a free 4-inch Uhuru pie. On Wednesday, October 6th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, join a web event titled Haitians at the Border, U.S. Out of Haiti, Down with Colonialism. Register to join on Zoom. Go to tinyurl.com/Haiti deportations. Chairman Omali Yeshitela will be speaking, as well as our Haiti expert, Alikia Ngoma, Secretary General of the African Socialist International, Loezi Kinshasa, and more. So again, tinyurl.com/Haiti deportations for this webinar. March for reparations to African people 1 year after the murder of George Floyd. It's not over, the struggle continues. This is a call to action to the white community to stand in solidarity with the African community's struggle for reparations and self-determination. The Uhuru Solidarity Movement is holding marches on Saturday, October 16th in Oakland, St. Louis, Philadelphia, St. Pete, and Portland. Even if you are not in one of these cities where the marches are being held, you can be a part of this campaign that is raising funds for the community basketball court, part of the Black Power Blueprint in St. Louis, Missouri. Visit uhurusolidarity.org for more information. The next day, on October 17th, USM will host a virtual day of reparations to African people on Zoom, featuring keynote speakers Chairman Omali Yeshitela and African People Solidarity Committee Chairwoman Penny Hess. You can register at tinyurl.com/Day of Reparations. The event will begin at 4 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, October 7th. The African National Women's Organization, ANWO, is hosting Who We Are, What We Believe, a 7-week public political education series that will help attendees understand African women's liberation through an African internationalist lens. Led by ANWO membership and recruitment coordinator Saeed Kamba, this series is open to everyone. We encourage questions and engagement. This will be live on Zoom and Facebook. Find this event on theburningspear.com/events and click on the registration button to get the Zoom link. The Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace and Reparations is holding its annual rally, March on the White House and conference on November 6th and 7th, 2021. Join us in deepening the struggle against police terror and honoring our political prisoners and prisoners of war. Learn more and register at blackisbackcoalition.org. Order your copy of Chairman Omali Yeshitela's latest books, Vanguard, The Advanced Attachment of the African Revolution, An Uneasy Equilibrium, and more by the chairman and other leaders of our movement at burningspearmarketplace.com. Like and follow the Loezi Kinshasa like page on Facebook for more African internationalist political education. Oh, next slide, please. Secretary General Loezi Kinshasa does frequent live events. Such as the War of Ideas series. He includes live sessions done in French. To get alerts of when SG Loezi is going live, make sure to like and follow his page today. Tune into White Lies Shattered, series of the Reparations in Action podcast featuring Penny Hess, chair of the African People Solidarity Committee, along with the Uhuru Solidarity Movement chair, Jesse Neville, and host, Jamie Simpson. Check out the show Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern on Black Pride 96 Radio and on demand at uhurusolidarity.podbean.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. This is a series that challenges and exposes the distortion of history by the colonial ruling class and reveals the truth about the past, present, and future from the eyes of the African working class. Uhuru Foods and Pies is hiring for a part-time baker in both Oakland, California and St. Petersburg, Florida. Culinary training is preferred. Join the work to build an independent African economy by baking for Black power. To apply, email resumes to oakland.volunteer@uhurufoods.org or mail your resume to 7911 MacArthur Boulevard, Oakland, California, 94605, or call 800-578-5157 for more information. Make your legacy a taste of freedom. Uhuru Furniture and Collectibles in both Oakland and Philly are hiring full-time truck drivers and full-time marketing coordinators. Do you have driving and furniture lifting skills, social media and print marketing experience? Can you work Wednesday through Sunday? If so, apply for these positions and contribute your labor and skills to the institution of the African People's Education and Defense Fund. Every day you can work with an amazing team and go home knowing that you're helping to build the independent African economy. Uhuru Furniture is just one of the ways APDF is paving the way for genuine economic development in the African community. What do you want your legacy to be? Apply by visiting our website in Oakland, uhurufurniture.blogspot.com, and in Philadelphia, that's uhurufurniturephilly.blogspot.com. On Tuesday nights from 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern, join Ralph Pointer on What's Happening Blog Talk Radio. Tune in by calling 347-857-3293. Ralph Pointer sits on the Black is Back Coalition Steering Committee and chairs the BIBC's Political Prisoners Working Group and also leads the Lynn Stewart Committee. We're also calling on people to follow the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project or visit developmentforafrica.org for important information, helpful tips, and updates regarding the colonial virus COVID-19. ABDEP has an international telehealth program, which is a free resource for African people to get our COVID-19 related questions and concerns answered by licensed doctors and nurses through Project Black Ankh. You can make your free virtual appointment with one of their professional health providers by going to developmentforafrica.org/telehealth. To keep up with our movement events, visit theburningspear.com's events page and subscribe to our mailing list. And last announcement, next, make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study and donate to PayPal at paypal.me/Omali Taught Me. So that's all we have for our announcements today. Thank you. And we're going to go ahead and get into our Q&A portion. So again, go ahead and link that into the Facebook and YouTube if you do have a question. And we're going to go ahead and acknowledge where people are viewing from, Chairman, before we take our first question today. So we have St. Louis, Missouri, Moorhead, Minnesota, Oakland, California, St. Petersburg, Florida, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Kuwait, Battle Creek, Michigan, Somerville, Massachusetts, Chicago, Illinois, Richmond, Virginia, Marion County, Georgia, Huntsville, Alabama, Delaware County, Pennsylvania, Fort Myers, Florida, North Dakota, Portland, Oregon, Hempstead, New York, Brooklyn, New York, Cleveland, Ohio, San Diego, California, Gainesville, Florida, London, United Kingdom, Lynn, Massachusetts, Bermuda, Sanford, Florida, Baltimore, Maryland, occupied Azania or South Africa, and Los Angeles, California. So thank you guys for tuning in wherever you're located. And we're going to go ahead and get into the questions, Chairman. This first one comes from Comrade Matsamela in San Diego. He said, Ahuru, Chairman, in your writings, you use Cheikh Anta Diop and other African historians who challenge a Marxist theory of human development. Alongside Diop, what do you think are some good sources and topics that you'd use in the creation of African internationalist text on dialectical and historical materialism?
Thank you, Comrade Matsamela. First of all, what I want to say is that I'm not a scholar. And I think that we do have some great scholars who are in our party, in our movement, our work. And Comrade Matsamela is one of them. And Comrade Louise Kinshasa, of course, is a scholar. In terms of what we are doing now, even this discussion on dialectical and historical materialism, it is really trying to solve the problem of the revolution. We've never, taken on a question purely out of some kind of abstract intellectual curiosity to learn this or that. But what we find ourselves is having to solve the problems and making us move from one place in history to the other, a place of as oppressed and colonized people to a future of a liberated people. And so there are all kinds of things that I think I've run into, but I have not been mostly conscious of running them into as a means of challenging Marx's assessment or understanding. I have read some things that are important. I think to some extent, Jose Jaffe's book on A History of Africa, that in many ways talked about what Marx characterized as primitive accumulation in a fashion that shows how the development of Europe, came from how Europe had become this entity that defined itself based on resources that it had taken, stolen from peoples from all around the world. I mean, that's been helpful, and it's something I've run into simply in the process of trying to move us forward. So unlike, people with a certain kind of discipline, as scholars, I would be hard pressed right now to come up with specific kinds of things, except to say that almost everything I've learned about our reality, to the point that I was able to separate my brains from the direction that our oppressor has given, so that I move from superstition. And I have moved from superstition, religious, various forms of obvious religion, and and other forms of superstition that makes it unnecessary for me to go back because I'm walking with somebody and we went on opposite sides of a pole and moving forward to make me have to be sure not to walk on the ladders or feel cursed because of broken mirrors and things like that. I mean, all elements of superstition, I've been able, I think, of those that I'm conscious of, I've been able to get rid of because they stood in the way of moving forward. And that one of the most powerful opponents of knowledge has been a religion for me. In general speaking, the struggles I've had as a young person trying to get to through reality and having to swim through the morass of religious obscurantism, etc. Once becoming free of that kind of stuff, or in the process of freeing myself, in the process of learning things about the world, then when I hear something about dialectical and historical materialism, I can use this tool, this method of investigation and analysis. And it has been able to point me in different directions toward solving the problems. And some of the problems we run into in this process is the problem of how we understand the world and conclusions we come to through looking at the world. I mean, this has been a part of the process, and this is what we're doing today, Comrade Masamela. Somebody once said, and I think it's true, a comrade of mine, that it's been an advantage for the party up to now. The fact that I am not, like a scholar or such. I'm not somebody who has come to certain kinds of conclusions through an organized discipline, through, like this whole bourgeois educational process, because sometimes that can lock you into a method which, independent of your will, just makes it difficult for one to be able to look for new ways of investigating and seeing the world. So I know I didn't answer your question, probably, Comrade Masamela, but that's for me how I understand things. And so I suggest that study the party's materials, and you will see imbued in almost everything we've ever written, put forth, you will see an expression of dialectical and historical materialism on virtually everything. Look at all of the political reports, you will see that. And engage in practice, that is to say, in trying to change the world within the party, through the party, etc. That's the learning experience. And that's absolutely necessary in terms of dialectical materialism and being able to understand the world and move forward. So, Comrade Masamela, that's about the best I can do with that. And sometimes I'm really apologetic because I am not, like the scholar, and don't have that kind of discipline in terms of education. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, and thank you, Comrade Masamela, for your question. He does have another one, but we'll take it a little bit later because we got a lot of questions rolling in, Chairman. Yes. So our next one comes from Comrade Director Tafari. He's a national director of organization for the Africa. And he's located in occupied Azania or South Africa. He says, Uhuru, Chairman, my question, what is the role of African intellectuals? And do we have any examples? Do African workers need intellectuals?
The African working class, we have to have our own intellectuals. I mean, who are engaged in intellectual pursuit. That becomes even a part of the work and activity that we're involved in. We just talked about the fact that we're in an extraordinary contest here. And one of the great contests we engaged in is the contest of ideas. And so that's a fight that we're involved in. And African intellectuals have the responsibility of contributing to the capacity of the African working class to engage in that struggle, and And the thing that we do is, in terms of creating African working class intellectuals, that's what the 14-point working platform is. That's what, you don't have the African petty bourgeoisie, so-called intellectuals, ordinary party member who understands the 14-point working platform can go out in the world, in our communities where it's critical. This is where the critical struggle has to be made among the masses of our people, taking this politic and using our own ingenuity in terms of the kinds of events and forums and things that we would do, engaging the masses, helping the people to come to revolutionary conclusion, even with music and art. One of the most important things I think happened with us is the relationship, dead prayers. Both comrades, M1 Matulu and Comrade Stick were both members of the party at one time, and they took party philosophy and popularized it through their art. And one of the most important in this art form called hip hop or et cetera, one of the most important things that in that whole realm has been especially the Let's Get Free album that was done by Dead Press. So the genius of the masses can be liberated, and the responsibility of a member of the African People's Socialist Party, one of the reasons we're having this discussion today, so that in the townships, in the communities, and where the most oppressed sector of the population live, we take this understanding to the people, arm the people, and make it impossible for the ideas of our oppressors to penetrate with any kind of effectiveness, whether those ideas come from the African petty bourgeoisie, or which is the bourgeoisie, the ruling class, the bourgeois ruling class indirectly, or whether it comes directly from the bourgeoisie in the form of various movies and other expressions that are popularized where we live. So that becomes our responsibility. That's what the African intellectual has a responsibility. This is we have a division of labor. We've created a whole department of cadre development, and some of the people who are in this meeting now participate in this process of cadre development. We have to work to make that something better, because this whole notion of the African intellectual as this sort of outlier out there, doing brilliant and ingenious things on her own is ridiculous. I mean, the African Internationalist intellectual has to participate in making the African revolution. And that means that the African intellectual has to be a part of the revolutionary African party, the international party of the working class. And that's the primary thing that has to do, and then become a servant of the working class and help to recreate itself. That is to say, the intellectual has to recreate itself throughout the party's instruments, organizations, and working with Comrade Director Akile to help create and distribute these ideas for the revolution. This whole notion of intellectual and intellectualism for its own sake to run around curing just your own intellectual itch is a bourgeois notion. So the African intellectual, first of all, has a responsibility to join the revolution and become a part of the process of this war of ideas at the service of the masses of African workers and oppressed people globally. Uhuru. Comment, Tafari.
Uhuru, Chairman, and thank you, Director Tafari, for that question, and Chairman for that answer. That was, I just really want to salute that answer. I'm going to go ahead and move it. Like I said, we have lots of questions, Chairman. You have sparked a lot of engagement and interest around this question. So we move to Comrade Timba in St. Pete, who says, Uhuru, Chairman, I salute you and the African People's Socialist Party. I have been hearing in the ruling class press a concern of what they call tribalism as an attack on what they call globalization. What is meant by this? And is this an example of the fracturing and weakening of imperialism?
Well, who is that? Was that Comrade Chimaring?
It's Timba.
Timba, and he's talking about how the bourgeoisie is now talking about tribalism because what he's talking about is the fracturing of the solidarity of this order that has been created by the bourgeoisie, where more and more people are finding identities and interests that are separate from the interests that have been defined for us and for the people through this world order that has been dominated for 600 years for several hundred years, and certainly for the last 75 years by the U.S. Increasingly, this order is being frayed, it's being challenged, and what have you. And because of that, and if we understand that what is the primary motive in society, all society, is production of life and reproduction of life, the capacity to feed, clothe, house ourselves, the growing expertise in being able to do that. And then if you look at the fact that we live in a world economy that feeds and clothes everybody unequally, of course, and then this system is being stressed, and because the oppressed people who function as the base of this operation now are challenging the ability of the system to function normally. So different groups of people are now finding their own, looking for their own separate solutions. They're looking for this not just in the United States, but looking for it globally. And that people around the world are reassessing their relationships to the United States. To see the United States losing control as the big hegemon, as the big dog, if you will. And inside the United States, people are scrambling now, looking to serve their own interests. And these are people who don't necessarily have some clear understanding of theory, philosophy, political economy, or anything like that. They just, they have their fears, they have their expectations based on how things have always been, how they've been taught that it should go, and how it's been and how they've taught it should go relies on the definition reality of the oppressor, of the colonized living at the expense of the colonizer, living at the expense of those who are colonized. And that thing has been shaken. And so you've got all these people running around now trying to find their own little piece of action that will make sure that they're okay, notwithstanding what might be happening to the whole. The whole now is being redefined. Sometimes we talked about how at different times Europe came into existence as a consequence of Celts and Normans and other groups of people who lived in this territory called England, finding a greater identity through going out into the world and building this economy, this world economy. That's where they came to be Europe. As this world economy now is being shaken and reshaped and redefined, and people are taking back their resources, now you see this retreat that's happening in different now forces now finding their own separate reality, going back to the kind of quote unquote tribalism that they used to exist in before the advent of the world economy and the world as we know it. So that's part of what's happening. It's happening globally, and it's happening increasingly inside the United States. And what you got to remember is that the order that we live in today, the colonial capitalist world economy, owes its existence to Europe stretching out and capturing resources and human beings and lands every place else around the world. Europe going out and doing all those things. And now as people are challenging that, taking back their resources, you find a certain kind of contraction, a certain kind of retreat. And even how people are learning to understand the world. There used to be a Brexit, and Brexit is in a state of decay now because more and more people are finding that more and more Brits are every white man for himself. And people are rearranging their relationships because the United States used to be the big dog. Now China is a bigger dog, and Russia, has a big bark too. So you have these people in various places, particularly in Europe and other places, in Africa and what have you, looking for different kinds of relationships. So this is what they're talking about. Yes, Timber, it is a consequence of the crisis of imperialism, that this thing that they're talking about, the tribal politics emerging inside the United States and actually globally. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Timba, for your question. Our next question comes from Comrade Jamal in Moorhead, Minnesota. And he says, Uhuru, Chairman, my apologies for the compound question. If it's true that the Marxist dialectic can be defined as simply capital versus labor, and further, the African internationalist dialectic can be defined as colonizer versus colonized, how can we reconcile a difference between colonialism and imperialism? Has there ever been a colonizer without an empire? I hope I read that right.
That's an extraordinary question. I don't think the Marxist dialectic can be defined simply as the labor versus, how does he put it? As labor.
Capital versus labor.
Capital versus labor. I don't think that's, I think that there is a discussion about a particular kind of mode of production that posits the two major contending forces as labor versus capital. I think that's absolutely true. And then moving beyond that, but I was just saying the whole dialectical process, that's just speaking to it as it relates to what they characterize as capitalist mode of production, where these are the primary contending forces. I hope I didn't say anything that makes it difficult for people to understand what I mean by that. And then the side of, so that's something. But and then when we talk about the colonizer, how did he put that about the colonizer? Can you set it up quickly? Here it is. I don't see it. Can you say that? What did he say about the colonizer quickly?
Yes. Further, the African internationalist dialectic can be defined as colonizer versus colonized. Mm-hmm. How can we reconcile a difference between colonialism and imperialism? Has there ever been a colonizer without an empire? So
when we talk about colonized versus the colonizer, we don't say that, we don't mean, when we talk about the colonized versus the colonized, we are redefining in many ways the class struggle existing in the world. We're talking about the existence of a mode of production that is more inclusive of all of the factors than what has been generally posited by Marxists. And so in so doing, we don't liquidate everything that Marx has said. We're just saying that what you've been defining as a mode of production is inadequate. That the mode of production now is one that encompasses the complete world economy that came into existence through colonialism. And there's a colonial mode of production that's the thing that gave rise to, that's the bridge between European feudalism and to this capitalist world order that we've come to experience. That's the colonial mode of production. So that's the first thing. So class struggle is definitely involved here, but the class struggle, what we're saying, is concentrated in the colonial question, that the main contest is not, and I guess that's what Comrade Jamal, the point that he was making. And so then he makes the point too about the issue of what did he say about imperialism and what?
Reconcile imperialism. Reconcile a difference between colonialism and imperialism. Has there ever been a colonizer without an empire?
There are so many parts to this question, and that presupposes unity with other parts of the question. The fact is that it was empire. Imperialism, again, is a term that owes its origin to the concept of empire. And it was this activity of empires that initiated slavery, colonialism, and what have you, that gave rise to capitalism. Marx, what Lenin has done is define imperialism as something that represents the highest stage, the highest expression of capitalism. He's saying that imperialism is capitalism that has become rotten ripe, etc. We say that imperialism, that capitalism itself is a consequence of imperialism having become rotten ripe. That is to say, the colonial enterprise, the Europe going out into the world, the empires going out into the world, and creating through their activity a whole new world economy. We are engaged right now in doing the kind of empirical data, research that shows concretely, unequivocally, that you couldn't have anything that you wouldn't have. The capitalism that we know today owes its existence to empire, to the fact that Europe went out and stole resources, stole human beings, and that this is the basis for what Marx characterized as a primitive accumulation giving rise to the whole social system. So I don't know about reconciliation of what imperialism and the other part of that equation that he just put forward. I hope that I spoke to it, Jamal. If I didn't, hit it back again to make sure that we do, because this has been a point of concern and interest by not only you but other people. Just as recently as yesterday, I was talking to a really important friend of our party, and about this question. For many people, this is where concerns are, and the concern really is because European communists have defined phenomenon a certain way based on their location in the world economy. And the rest of us did not have the ability to articulate our position from our location, because our location was one of total domination. And so that we fell victim more or less to the definitions given to reality by the oppressor, but the oppressor rested on a foundation of our existence, our oppression. Now the struggle that we're involved in gives us our own voice, our own eyes, and our own analysis. And so we're challenging some of the things that's being said. Our objective coming into this was not to challenge what they said, but to get free. And part of the struggle to be free, we found ourselves running into these definitions of reality. We run from one definition of reality given by the colonizer that's clearly identified as the capitalist, colonialist boss, et cetera. Then there's another group of colonizers who position themselves in opposition to the capitalists, the bosses, et cetera, but they all rest upon colonial foundation. And so they all have their own colonial worldview, which is not to say that some of their worldviews don't come closer to defining reality than others, but that's why we talked from the very beginning that our responsibility to African working class is to develop our own and systematize our own theory, not just to say that we don't want to do stuff like the white man did it or some nonsense like that, but because we on this trek for freedom, and we would use anything. If the white man came up with something that helps, let's use it. We do that all the time. All of us do. Even the people who complain that what we are saying now, sounds like Marxism and the white man, et cetera, they do too. I mean, they speak to us in the white man's language, they on the white man's institutions, instruments, et cetera. So that's not the fundamental problem. The problem is whether or not what's being said, articulated, and done best reflect the interest and the objective reality that we are dealing with as a people. And that's something that the dialectical materialism helps us to get to also, so that we get to objective truth based on empirical data evidence to the extent that it's possible to achieve that. And if we can't achieve it right away, to know that that empirical data evidence is somewhere out there that we keep looking for it, as opposed to surrendering to what is presented to us as reality of the moment. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Comrade Jamal, for your question. Keeping it rolling, Chairman, we have a question from King L in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, who asked, Uhuru, Chairman, thank you once again for an enlightening study. This issue of philosophy and ideology is of extreme importance, as it is a fact of life that all people are inducted into some ideology/philosophy or another from the moment we start to be socialized as babies. You referenced Stalin's revolution, and I wonder whether you think it or Mao's revolution as more applicable and relevant to the contemporary African revolution we are engaged in, and what about them can we use to our benefit?
Well, I think that the thing that was really beneficial, a thing that was really beneficial to Stalin, this is despite the fact that despite the contradiction people have with what they characterize as Stalinism, et cetera, as Stalin came about at a particular time when the Russian Revolution was under extraordinary fierce assault by all kinds of forces, internally and external. And and you got to remember that the Russian Revolution was made with the assumption by some that somehow Russia could be this socialist island in this sea of capitalist predators and what have you. This went even against some of the previous understandings and arguments, even within the Communist Party of Russia, about whether or not there could be socialism in one country. So you got a whole world economy that's dominated by all kinds of forces who attacked Russia, who isolated Russia economically, who did everything they could to make sure Russia failed, because the whole notion of working class coming to power was hostile to how the capitalists understood the world should look. And also, more concretely, the fact is that it meant another independent force able to contend with capitalist interests in the world when you have a Russia, whether it was Russia based on the working class coming to power as what it posited itself as being, or whether it was just another emergent social contending power with the ability to challenge the hegemony of the existing order, of capitalist order. So Stalin was really important because he kept the Russian Revolution alive. And as one aspect of course, he did some other stuff that was problematic as hell, for the revolutionary movement of oppressed peoples around the world that we won't go into now. So, but just in terms of some of the historical significance, Stalin was there at the time where the Russian Revolution came under major assault and was under major assault, and he held it together during that period of time. Mao was an extraordinary force because what Mao did was he broke also, and remember Lenin did too, broke some of the basic assumptions of Marxism in the sense that Marx, had talked about the sort of an evolutionary process that was disrupted from time to time with revolution that took from stage to stage. And in this instance, he talked about how the development of capitalism would automatically sort of and through the industrial working class overturning the industrial ruling class, that would lead to the advent of the socialist, more or less utopia that was going to happen. But Mao, here you got being people living mostly as peasants and things like that, who were dominated also by the whole world global capitalist system. How is he going to make a revolution based on the industrial working class seizing power from an industrial bourgeoisie? It can't. So he used dialectical and historical materialism, wrote some great stuff on contradictions. You should look for that. People are interested in this discussion of dialectics and historical materialism, and put forth the premise that that you could ultimately see how the peasantry organized through with his revolutionary party would be able to encircle the cities, and that this was strangle the cities and then come to power. And this was a really important thing that Mao had put forth, and it was based on some principles of guerrilla warfare that the peasantry had to engage in for the Chinese Communist Party to come to power. And we find elements of significance and value in that, and also elements of value in some of the stuff that was done in terms of Stalin and protecting the party itself and promoting, like the party. So I don't think that we're looking again at trying to, what we are doing is we're not Stalinists. We're not Marxists. We are African internationalists, and we're trying to solve the problems of the revolution. And we're looking for, and we are utilizing the scientific methods of investigation and analyzing it so that we don't become slaves to any view except our own. Then African internationalism is the consequence of, and the still developing consequence of our utilization of this method of investigation and analysis. And it's bringing us closer and closer every day to what is objective truth, and it serves us. And we've got 50 years of history to show that it serves us as the longest lasting continuum from the Black Revolution of the 60s. So it's not just that we are here, but we are here as a part of a continuum, that every advance of the revolution was our advance and every setback was our setback. So we've always been, as a party for the last 50 years, engaged in solving the problems of the revolution. So as a continuum, do you see? So I'm not just saying that we've been here for a long time. A lot of people have been alive for a long time, but they haven't been part of a continual process of making this revolution. We have been, and we continue to learn and we continue to develop as a consequence of that. So Uhuru, Comrade Director.
Uhuru, Chairman.
That was, who was that we were just addressing? Was that, who was it, say it again?
King L.
Oh, King L, Uhuru King L. So I hope that was helpful.
Uhuru. All right, Chairman. So I'm going to take one more question before we wrap up today's study. And this last question comes from Comrade Maito. And he asks, in the context of today's study, can you speak to the consequences of COINTELPRO, its long-range goal of discouraging young Africans from identifying with a revolutionary trajectory? How today, 60 years later, it's no accident that our youth unsuspectingly embrace Black capitalism as a means to liberation and revolution?
Well, I just want to say, Comrade, I really appreciate the question and intervention. And more than anything, I appreciate it because you remind a lot of people, including people who may be on this discussion today, of the ongoing intervention by the enemies of our revolution. You're talking about the imperialist state. You're talking about it as it exists inside the United States, but it's all over the world. And it continues to move to protect the status quo, the existing social system. It continues to protect the relationships between the oppressed and the oppressor, the colonized and the colonizer. That relationship is something that's not supposed to be destroyed as far as our oppressors are concerned. And one of the things that happened, of course, in the 1960s is that we gained access to a particular kind of intervention that was under the leadership of the Federal Bureau of Investigation that's been called the COINTELPRO, counterintelligence program. And that it had specific goals as it related to the Black Revolution of the 1960s. You spoke to some of them, and they included some things which would appear obvious to us now. They included things like preventing the rise of a Black Messiah, as they characterize it, and making sure that young people did not come into the revolutionary project and doing everything they could to misdirect. And we see that over and over again. We've seen in our own party people who've been attached and connected to our own party and to what's supposed to be the revolutionary project. They step in, they create the horrible kinds of offenses against the people. They do things that are designed to make sure that nobody wants to join the revolution, where you be the stuff that people have done in the name of, and then some of the so-called intellectuals that have been promoted and held up by sectors of the bourgeoisie. So that's an ongoing process. And if we study the whole history of state intervention in revolutionary projects, we see that it preceded what's happening to Africans in the United States with the COINTELPRO. And the COINTELPRO was not the only thing that was used against the African Revolution. That's been the whole history. Their objective is to make sure that revolution does not occur. Our objective is to make sure that revolution occurs. And what they have done is created a science. That's what counterinsurgency is, a scientific approach that's by the oppressor to guarantee that the oppressed never attains freedom. And so some of the most obvious things, if you will, they have been like the COINTELPRO, et cetera. But there are some things that are not so obvious. And they have to do even with things like the electoral process. They have things to do with these things that under the leadership of the bourgeoisie appear to offer the enslaved some way of realizing our aims as slaves without overthrowing slavery, without overthrowing colonialism, without overthrowing the process. So there's a way forward they would say. And so that's an ongoing process. And so the responsibility of the revolution, our responsibility as the advanced detachment, is to take the revolution to every quarter and to provide it with the kind of political education and to provide it with dialectical and historical materialist approach to every question, which is, and to go ourselves and to be on the ground in virtually every community, and as a responsibility of the party to lead everything. That's our responsibility to do that. That's the greatest protection that we're going to have. And because the colonizer and the oppressor has had to create scientifically based means by which to keep the oppressed, and they will do it and they will change it. When this doesn't work, they function just like a virus that can create a new variant. When that one seems to be less successful than the last one, you think you've got some kind of vaccination for, and you really don't, because it continues to change to the extent that you become relatively effective in dealing with it, and it morphs into something else. So we just have to have a revolutionary party. We just have to have an advanced detachment. We just have to have an organization of professional revolutionaries. That's what we do all the time. And in that process, and we bring the masses of petite people into this participation, because what we've learned for a long time is that the security of the party lies in the masses of the people, and the masses of the people have been won to these ideas, and the masses will look out for the party, whether they are members of the party or not, if they know what the party stands for, what the party is about, if they're members of the party who's moving, that are moving along with the masses all the time. That's what Mao Zedong says something about the gorilla has to be like the fish in the sea. And the analogy is that the people are the sea, and the gorilla has to be able to move through the people, but to do that through creating the kind of political and ideological and organizational relationship with masses of the people, so that the interests of the revolution is clearly understood by the masses to be their own interests. And we have to be transparent so that the people can see us and what we do and what we stand for, and that they are brought into the process of what we are doing, and so that they stand for the same thing we stand for, so that when you see the kind of intervention by snitches, by slime, by gutless forces who will come into the midst of the people for the purpose of undermining it, for bringing disease and things like that, then the people are better armed and can protect themselves. And that's what the revolution has to be able to do. Uhuru, comrade.
Uhuru, Chairman. Thank you, Maito, for your question. And Chairman, that's going to, I think, bring us to the end of today's study on dialectical materialism. And I just want to turn it over to you for any closing remarks before we wrap it up today.
The thing I want to say is that this is not, this question of dialectical historical materialism, this question of dialectical materialism is not something that people will come out here with a full grasp of after one or two discussions like this. We're going to keep talking about it, but I'm really going to call on people to continue to study, to look at this, investigate the question of dialectical historical materialism. It's not as complicated as some people would have us to understand it to be. And there's an aspect of this discussion that you can go into that even approaches a certain kind of absurdity when you talk about it just in terms of the political life of the party and the people. But it's once we get a grasp of it, then we are much better equipped to find the way forward. And that's what we are constantly involved in doing, being able to investigate, analyze our situation, and analyze our situation not just in general terms, but in the context of where we're coming from and where it is that we're trying to go, and all the forces that we have to engage with in order to get there. So thank you, Comrade Director Keeley. Let's do this again next Sunday. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, and I just really want to salute your leadership and just being a brilliant theoretician in the development of African internationalism, and yeah, this discussion that we're engaged in today is just really, really helpful. I'm excited to be going over this. And as the comment section indicated, I think everybody else is also excited to explore this more as well. So thank you so much. And just really, again, salute your leadership. And I want to let people know that if your question was unanswered, don't freak out, because we will take it in the beginning of next week's Q&A portion. So so thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study, and continue to support the OTM show by donating to paypal.me/Omali Taught Me. As Chairman said, we'll be visiting this topic again next week. So we'll see you all next Sunday. Uhuru, comrades. Vanguard up.